Hey everyone, we are jumping on stage here. Give everyone just a quick second to float in. Hey Matt, how are you today? Happy
Good.
Wednesday.
How's it going? Yeah, good. How you doing?
Good. Thanks to everyone for jumping in again. For those who haven't joined a WTF before, please use the chats in either the AirMeet on the right or the LinkedIn Live, and we will make sure we're passing those over and addressing those. For those who have joined, the more conversation and dialogue and questions we get tend to be the better sessions. But really excited to be joined by Matt today, who is the CEO and co-founder of Channel Mix. So Matt, would love to get a quick introduction to you, your background, as well as Channel Mix, and then we can jump in because I'm interested in your perspective on WTF is RevOps.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you and the crew. Channel Mix is we're about a 15-year-old company. We really grew up as a services company and really flipped and rebranded our company about 3 years ago to Channel Mix. And Channel Mix is a full stack marketing analytics platform with embedded AI, and essentially its job is to take data from all of the sources that marketers use, all their media sources, all their marketing web sources, bring in CRM and lead data, and understand the effectiveness of marketing. And our AI engine tells them how to spend it in the future to maximize ROI. So it's definitely aligned to RevOps, and so look forward to digging into the topics today.
No, awesome. I think, the obvious question that I'm going to ask is, where does marketing ops sit, right? So as you are primarily working with marketers and marketing ops, do you see most of those organizations having marketing ops under RevOps? Are they decentralized? Like, would love your perspective on kind of what you've seen most success with.
Yeah, I think so. Decentralization is still the theme that I see. I think marketing in general is typically I'll call it an understaffed team that's requested to do a whole lot of things. Um, and as a result, I really still kind of see it decentralized. I think that RevOps is obviously definitely a growing strategy, and our platform and really our approach helps marketers weave into that strategy for sure. But for the most part, I still see it. I still see marketing ops, sales ops, and then an overarching RevOps strategy is decentralized today.
No, that's super interesting perspective. And like, the other question that comes up a lot is like, who owns marketing data, right? So where does the data live? And knowing you guys have, a platform that's helping to not only centralize and unify and distribute data for decision making, who ultimately owns that?
Yeah, I mean, for us, I would tell you it's the organization's data. We're just managing it on their behalf. But essentially, marketing data. There's two parts to that question. So the first question is marketing data is probably the most fragmented, disconnected ecosystem that exists. I tell people I'm a recovering CIO, and the data in marketing is just gross. I mean, it's you have a lot of walled garden data that just doesn't want to talk. And so from an ownership perspective, it really comes down to who's going to bring all of this data together. So in our world, again, we're tasked with doing that. But many times for larger brands, we are actually just feeding that data into their warehouse so that their internal teams can own it. Ultimately, an organization needs to own it and needs to make the decision that marketing isn't an expense, that it's an investment. And if organizations have that concept, then you're going to need data to demonstrate the value of that investment.
Absolutely. And so when we think about, I laugh because I'm like, data is the easy part, right? Insight's the hard part. And like actually, and it's easy to get the data. It's harder to know what to do with it. What are you seeing in terms of, if you had to give best practices to, knowing we've got ops people on the phone or on the meet, whatever we're on right now, marketing people, sales people,
Yep.
like what are the metrics that like we really should be caring about and paying attention to that we're likely not, and why?
Yeah, sure. There's really kind of three layers of a data ecosystem everyone should be thinking about. Number one is, I mentioned on the onset, marketing activity and marketing media spend, right? So everything that's happening on my website and everything that's happening in the media space, from where I'm spending my dollars, both online and offline, literally all the activity that I'm creating in up funnel, right? So I spend money to create awareness and interaction about my brand. So step number one is I've got to get all that data together into a single source of truth. Like RevOps and really marketing ops and sales ops can't all function together until you solve the core problem with marketing, which still today, after 15 years of being a co-founder in this company and helping lead it, it's still one of the number one problems that every marketer has. It's a disconnected ecosystem that needs to have a single source of truth. So once you understand that, you can begin to understand the how to optimize media. Like that's step one, and how it affects things like website traffic. That doesn't help me understand the revenue, right? All that is activity. It's just things that are interacting. I get click-through rates, I get cost per click. None of that shows up in the P&L, only the expense side of the equation. So I have to start tying it to something meaningful. So phase two is what we call, let's start with leads, or let's start with transactions that are happening on your website. And then level three is we go all the way to the customer, right? So from cost to customer.
Yeah. How have you found, in this like cookieless world, right? Like that tie back and helping kind of to overcome that with the various, privacy laws that have come into place and all the fun wrenches that everyone likes to throw our way as trackers.
Yeah. So I always say that marketing analytics was ruined by direct mail. And here's why. Because, I'm a Gen Xer and I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up in the 80s. And my point is that I would get a catalog and I would figure out what I'm going to order from that catalog, and then I'd send in my order. Well, there's this little thing called digital and the internet that changed everything. Unfortunately, the mindset that we still have in marketing is I can still draw this straight line to Molly saw this ad and then she clicked on this and then she went in store and bought this. And that is all BS and bunk.
Little do you know that my 6-year-old uses my phone for most things and is probably driving most of my ads.
100%. And so back to those three kind of stages, you really have to look at what the intelligence that it's giving you. So for the longest time, as a crutch, we've used third-party cookies, right, to try to demonstrate the value of a media spend. Well, guess what? If you're running Facebook and you're running Google Ads and you're running Snapchat and you're running LinkedIn and some display and retargeting, every one of those platforms is going to take credit for the same conversion. So RevOps, when you put it through the lens of RevOps, well, that's really stupid. Like that is not a measurement. Third-party cookies were never designed to measure the value of spend. They were designed as an optimization tactic. So third-party cookies are going away with obviously with all the changes in privacy. That actually helps us to talk about this and get to at least a first-party cookie space. First-party cookies, things like Google Analytics, right? It's your own world. You can still draw some really good conclusions there using multi-touch attribution as a click-based model to understand the path to conversion. But ultimately, we have to start thinking about marketing measurement as it relates to how it's driving revenue through data science and AI, because the ecosystem is too disconnected. There's too many decision journeys that happen, and it's truly impossible to follow any one individual.
Right. And there's so many like on-site versus off-site versus online versus offline. And then you add in kind of the sales influence into things as well. Then
That's right.
You get the spaghetti model of very much nonlinear attribution.
It's nonlinear, and that's where, tactics that aren't new, media mix modeling isn't new. However, in our product today, you can stand up a media mix model in 15 minutes and it'll start to learn. So the thing that's changed
for those on the call who don't know what a media mix model is, do you want to define that really fast?
Yeah, for sure. So a media mix model is essentially looking at, I'll call them signals in the data, right? So the very simple analogy could be things like I'm looking how much did I spend, when did I spend it, and where did I spend it? So TV, radio, print, paid search, paid social. So I'm looking at all of those activities. I don't care about the interaction. I don't care about the click. I don't care about the cookie, right? So I look at that pool of data, and then I create target variables in my other data set, like leads, transactions, revenue. And the job of a media mix model is to look at all of these ingredients to understand what's working and what's not working, right? So the model should tell you, hey, based on what you did last month, last quarter, last year, this is how you should spend your money in the future. So a media mix modeling is a planning planning strategy, right? It predicts ROI. So that's essentially where we're going as an industry, and AI is just accelerating the pace in which we need to do that.
Perfect. And I know I kind of interrupted a bit as we talked through, the metrics and leveraging, thinking about how marketing operations, marketing analytics, right, should then be working back with revenue operations. What have you seen forging that relationship, and like, what's the right cadence and reviews and kind of like telling that story?
Yeah, so marketing and sales always get along. I don't know if you know this, but they never have any problems, and no one team complains about the other. So let me give you an example, right? So let's say I'm a marketer that's tasked with generating leads for sales. So that linchpin between somebody who raises their hand and fills out a form to them becoming a marketing qualified to a sales qualified lead and ultimately to an opportunity. That point between somebody raising their hand, between marketing, what marketing delivered, and what sales is working from an inbound lead perspective, that's the focus. And the focus has to be data driven. Like, too often these conversations are qualitative, like, oh, all of my leads to marketing suck, so I don't even pay attention. And the marketing says, oh, well, I sent all these leads to sales and they didn't work them. Well, okay. So what we do, we actually
10 years later, this is still the conversation that's happening, right?
Still a conversation. So what you have to do is, when you line it up into what we call a pipeline data set, I can actually see these things side by side. And then you start having crazy things like quantitative conversations, because the data is saying I generated 1,000 leads and you only qualified 2. Why?
Right.
Well, let's look at the activity supported underneath. And this is where sales ops and marketing ops begin to really come together, right? So the data strategy and the holistic view of what's happening allows then these operational teams to start talking. And a lot of those conversations are around, well, my workflow in a lead nurturing tool isn't working right into a CRM tool, or my inbound leads are coming in through a form and they're getting fired off to something and it's not making into my lead nurturing platform. So that's where the operations teams, in harmony really with the RevOps strategy, begin to look at how to bridge that gap
and how to improve the process, right? And I think that's where we use data to help drive the process, but also data is an output of the process, right? So you've got to think about it as like the beginning and the end, and really using that to define what those workflows should be and how they get classified, and especially like disposition, right? Like, this isn't good. Well, why isn't it good? Like, so how do you capture that and start to gauge that information that you can then ultimately tie back to, why is what I'm bringing in from this type of campaign on Twitter generally not converting as well as what I'm bringing in from this type of campaign on Twitter, and very specific, and getting into, the optimization piece, which is, where I think channel mix is coming into play to help streamline that, use AI, and then, help predict where they should put investment. Correct me if I'm misspeaking for your platform, but.
No, that's right. I mean, so there's 2 strategies. There's multi-touch attribution, which, for those of you who don't know, it's essentially just looking at the path that people take to a conversion event, right? So let's say it's lead gen. So let's say you come in through organic search and you leave, you come in through paid search, you leave, you come back through an email and you convert. Cool. You have three channel interactions in that path. That is an optimization strategy, and you should be using that in on a daily basis to optimize your campaign spend and channel. And then, because it's bottom up, and then you have top down to create the sandwich, which is media mix modeling. So media mix modeling is listening to all those things, learning, and then telling you how to spend it.
Yeah, because I think so, because of the lack of information, right? Historically, we think about, oh yeah, you filled out this form on our website, and your UTM parameter at the point you filled out this form was, CPC. But, you actually came to our website 2 days ago from a Facebook ad versus Google, but didn't convert, right? So like, how do we, being able to really tell that story, what was truly that first touch that drove the interest versus what was the conversion event? How are you helping, seeing companies really define that strategy and look through those pieces?
So if you think about it as a spectrum, right? Last click attribution, which means the last, in your example, the last channel that I use to make a conversion. Paid search. That is direct mail marketing thinking. It's the last thing that I did. So I'm going to give all of the credit to that last channel. Well, that's not right. So step one is look at all of the channel interactions that are happening.
Yep.
And then step two is actually use a model that doesn't care about the path, right? Because we have to break free from this whole concept of measuring marketing based on a path. That is
there is no path.
I mean, it's an
if you work at a company that has a clear path, good for you, because I have yet to have that one.
It doesn't exist. It can't exist because of privacy and cookies and the way that the ecosystem exists today.
Yep. Yeah. So then finish your thought. Sorry about that.
No. So, I mean, so from an optimization perspective, whether it's a channel or a tactic or a campaign, you need to do that while you're in campaign. And that's where you lean into a multi-touch attribution strategy, which is click-based, but it tells you how people are interacting and the path that they're taking to a conversion. But then before your next campaign, you go into your forecasting and planning process. And this is how we break down the walls at Channel Mix, right? So you actually do this crazy thing called alignment, where you sit down with sales and marketing and we talk about what do we need to generate in the next quarter for sales. Oh, okay, cool. I need to create 100 new customers. All right. So then let's look at how our pipeline is performing. Let's forecast into the future what it would take to generate 100 customers. And then I use AI to tell me how to optimize that spend, right? To meet that target variable in this case, or that targeted goal, which is 100 customers, maybe I got a 10% conversion rate, so I need 1,000 leads. Okay, whatever the variable is, the AI engine will tell you what channels to use to meet that goal.
I have two follow-up things. So I'm going to say both of them and then we'll pick a path, but I want to say both so I don't forget the first one.
Sure.
So one of the things I want to make sure we come back to is the maturity model, because I think that we're so far on the maturity model. So I want to make sure we touch on how do we get people started? But before I do that, I want to talk through, one of the things that you said, which is such a key word, is forecasting, right? And we generally have the connotation of forecasting in terms of, sales, how am I going to perform? Am I going to hit my goal or not? But understanding where forecasting happens at different points of the funnel, I think is so important. And, generally, as a former marketer myself and working in marketing operations, right, I was I'm going to run a campaign and this is what I think is going to happen, right? Then we're yeah, it worked or it didn't work, right? So I'd love to kind of dig into, true, what are you seeing as best practices for, forecasting from a marketing perspective? Not only, I'm guessing in terms of I'm going to spend this and get this from top of funnel, but how does that then come down?
Yeah.
To truly revenue impact.
Yeah, I'll tell you the mistakes that continue to be made.
I probably am guilty of them too.
Oh, no, it's okay. This is a safe room. We've all done these things. So we typically look at strategies like media mix modeling and forecasting and attribution within marketing as kind of three separate camps, right? And so when you do that, you're creating siloed conversations, but you're also not always looking at the same data. So back to my first premise on the maturity curve, step number one for everyone listening and everyone in marketing is you've got to get your data into a single source of truth. I'm not talking about sales data. I'm not talking about lead data. I'm talking about all of your marketing data. It has to exist in a single repository, which is really how Channel Mix was born, by the way. It was just a big engine to be able to aggregate all this data together. But as you think about, the alignment then process, if I create that single set of data and then I ingest things like lead volume and transaction and revenue volume, then I have not only a single data set for us to understand what marketing is doing, but it's the same data set to forecast. It's the same data set to be able to predict using a media mix modeling strategy. And it's the same data set that I'm going to use while I'm in campaign on a multi-touch attribution process. So I can't stress enough the consistency of data. And we know this, from a RevOps strategy perspective, the consistency of data is what drives everything. Because if you don't have clean data and you don't have connected data, you can't make clear decisions.
Yeah. And I think, the thing that you talked about, right? Clean data and then connected data. And I think the piece, obviously clean data, I think we understand that, but connected data, right? And drilling into what that means, because we live in this, I'm going to call it point solution world, right? And we have a lot of point solutions that generally don't always connect. And we talk a single source of truth, I think is could be a whole dissertation on its own of like what that actually means and how that works. Yeah. But I'd love to talk about, you know, what does connected data look like, right? Like what does good connected data actually look like?
Yeah. So in its simplest form, right? So let me just pick on Google Ads and Facebook ads. So typically in the analytics space, and obviously we've been at this a long time, there isn't a connected strategy. It's kind of what I call a report puke. Like, oh, I pulled data from Google Ads and I throw it on a dashboard, and I pull data from Facebook ads and I throw it on a dashboard, and I just kind of see it next to each other. That's not connected data. It's not integrated data. It's just data. You just moved it from one place to another to say, hey, this is the activity that I did. None of that is revenue generating. It just isn't. And so connected data means I'm going to take Facebook ads and Google ads, and I'm going to integrate it together into a single data set, along with web activity, along with lead activity, and along with the revenue into a connected data model. Like that's essentially what we're doing within Channel Mix, and it does it. Obviously, it's what we built it for. So it flattens it all out into one single source of truth that allows me to do all of these things, from reporting to multi-touch attribution to forecasting, ultimately to media mix modeling. Because if you have your data right and it's connected, it unleashes all of those things, not only more efficiently, but most importantly, consistently.
I think about, and I think a lot about, you know, and I'm like 5 years ago, you know, when we talked about data warehousing and data lakes and like what that looks like, you know, you have these, and in my brain again is like, I always think about like the folder, right? You have these like all these folders, and it's like now we're taking the folders and actually like putting the same data in the same folder. So like 5 years ago, we got to the point where it's like, okay, everything's in the same filing cabinet, right? When we think about data, you know, data warehouse, my brain, you know, goes to Amazon. Okay, we're like on these shelves, we're in the filing cabinet. Then each thing has a folder. Now we're moving into how do we actually take the paper from the folder and put the things on the same paper in the same folder so that we can use that information in the same place. And, you know, when you think about, you know, what has to happen for a business to change that mindset, right? Like, I don't think companies typically wake up and are like, yeah, I need unified data. Woo! You know, what is that pivotal point, or like, what's that impetus that really helps to drive those types of conversations? Or when should companies start having those conversations?
Yeah, I think that, you know, I can only speak through the lens of our platform, and I'll kind of get to when, but I think the starting point for any organization, if you're looking at marketing operations and trying to bring together marketing operations and sales operations and ultimately RevOps together, you have to decide, and this is going to sound stupid, but it's true. You have to decide if marketing is an expense or an investment, plain and simple. Because if you're just writing checks and you don't care, well, guess what? You don't need to worry about the downstream revenue impact that marketing has. Now, believe it or not, in 15 years, I've actually had some of those conversations. Like, we just don't care. We're just writing checks. Yep. Okay, well, then you don't need analytics. Good talking with you.
I wish I had that luxury. Can I be on that pay? Can I be on that payroll, please? That'd be great. Can you give me the name of those companies?
Can I just be your check writer? I'm not accountable to anything. I'm just gonna.
No, I want to be the cashier.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do some stuff. Yeah, I want to be exactly. I want to be the recipient. I want to be the agency doing that. So that sounds stupid, but it's real. Like, you have to decide if okay. So today, I don't have nearly as many of those conversations as I have in the past. But so number one, culture. Okay, cool. Marketing is investment. Well, the first thing we got to do, then next step 2 is we've got to get all the data together. And it doesn't matter. So we have a data pipeline product. So I can bring all this data together, aggregate, send it to you in a nice, neat bow every single day, so you can use it. We call it analysis ready data. Or you can continue to stay on our stack, which is all AWS, of course. And so we in that process, where, to use your analogy, we're literally emptying all the filing cabinets. And if I were to take all that paper and tape it up on the board, like, all the pieces of paper then are taped together into a data structure and a data model. And so that's the first step. And then you start talking about, how do you want to use it? Well, I need to understand how to drive more leads for less budget. Okay, cool. So in our process,
like, what does that mean? Yeah.
What does that mean?
Let's talk about that.
How do you define a lead? Where does the lead go? Is there a qualification process in your lead? So we have a lot of those kind of conversations as we're onboarding our product, because I would tell you that not only is marketing data messy, and we figured out a lot of processes within our product to stitch it all together. I think the thing that most organizations still struggle with, that I see time and time again, it's kind of parallel to is marketing apps decentralized.
Yep.
I think a symptom of that you see within organizations, both mid and large, that we work with, is the processes are so different. Like, I don't know. I mean, we're just focused on getting stuff into our lead nurturing platform, and whatever sales does with it afterward, I don't really know. So, you know what I mean?
It's the
Or we're trying.
accountability and the ownership, right? It's like we
Yeah,
get so focused on this but until, marketing has a revenue goal or an influence goal, like they don't
that's
really
right.
care.
They don't really care. And marketing, that's why we can't live in a world anymore, particularly as connected as the customer journey is for us. It's not connected for the brand. So we
Yep.
have to create that connection. And so you have to start breaking down these process silos where, yeah, sometimes it syncs over or it goes straight into a lead form in Salesforce or HubSpot, whatever. I don't really know what happens after that. We don't really have a good process. Or, hey, I'm still, I have a 100-person sales organization. Literally, this is a true statement. I had this conversation about 2 weeks ago. We don't have a CRM. Everybody just kind of does their own thing. I'm like, oh God.
It's all in a Google sheet. Everyone
Yeah.
has edit access.
Yeah. So, okay. So we just call that opportunity. It's an opportunity-rich environment. So.
And I think the one thing we haven't talked about, right, is like we keep talking about marketing being top of funnel, right? Marketing is not just top of funnel. Marketing is truly full funnel, right? So how do you help to make those bridges and those adjustments as, you're putting investment into expansion or into, supporting the opportunity cycle, like subliminal marketing, in those types of cases?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure. So, typically, again, I'll just use a lead gen example. Marketing's job is to deliver qualified leads that are ready for the next phase of a conversation. Okay. And so, yes, there's some retargeting and there's some nurturing that happens once
Yep.
you get into the sales funnel side. And all of those become attributes that you can use inside of your media mix model. But the I hear this all the time. Now, and let me give you an example, right? So I know that I was able to connect somebody who came in from a paid search ad using last click, and I want to pass the fact that they came in through paid search, through their lead form, into their contact form, into the opportunity, into the customer.
Yep.
You know what my response to that is? That's really dumb. Because for two reasons. Number one, you just created a whole lot of data linkage and lineage that is not going to give you the answer that is actually true.
Right.
Just by the simple fact that paid search, in this case, a Google ad, happened to be the last thing that I did. Right. So now I'm going to make all of my customer acquisition strategy decisions from a budget perspective based on this one thing. That's really dumb. And I say that with all the love in the world, but it's dumb.
And if you think about your experience, right, like, and generally, like, I think perspective helps people understand reality a little bit. And you sit down and say, like, what was the last thing you bought, right? What was the last thing you bought on Amazon? How'd you get there?
Yep. Yeah. How did you get there? And
why did you get there, right? Like,
right? So yeah,
and what are the 5 things that got you there that you have no idea actually influenced you to get there?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's simple. I mean, I'm the biggest sucker for Facebook ads that there is, but I don't buy it straight from the ad. I click on it. It catches my eye. I look at it.
Yeah.
I leave. I go do a search. I find it on Amazon and do a bunch of reviews. Maybe I'll go check out their website, and then maybe I'll search for it again. Oh, okay, cool. Or maybe they'll hit me with a retargeting email. So I finally make the purchasing. Okay. All of that journey that I just described, I cannot connect in a cookie world. And so you have to control what you can control. And so to your point, marketing isn't just up funnel. The middle of that point, right, primarily is going to be your first party space, which is your website.
Yep.
And you need to be able to capture it and measure it. So how many impressions does it take to generate a lead? Right? How many clicks? How many interactions? What's my click-through rate take in order for me to generate a lead? Those all become the KPIs then that I can monitor and measure as I work my way down the funnel. How many leads does it take to generate an opportunity? Cool. Right? How many opportunities does it take to generate a customer? Those are all metrics that I can see when I connect my full funnel. But that means marketing and sales data is now connected and it's now talking.
And how do you see, like, and I keep throwing a lot at you, so thanks for bearing
Sure.
with me on this. But when we get into, this, I'm going to say salesless world, right? We go into this more of like this product-led growth and, using those components, so joining marketing and sales data is one thing. How do we join marketing and product data and start to look at that impact?
Well, sure. So essentially, product becomes a component of your revenue stream, right?
Yep.
So your top line revenue data set is going to say how much revenue I generated, or what's my type
Or
of account,
usage or whatever. Yeah.
what's my product, what's my SKU, all of those sorts of things. So the dimensionality within that data, it's all part of the same data stream, right? So in our world, when we're saying, cool, we've brought order to the chaos of marketing data. Now, what are we trying to accomplish? Is it do I need more traffic on my site because my click-through rate, my conversion rate on my site actually is pretty good, and my add to cart rate is pretty good? I just need more traffic. Okay,
Yep.
cool. Let's model that. What's the best way for you to get more traffic, the most cost-effective way? Or is it, hey, I need to sell more widgets of product B? Okay, well, and here's how people have bought that in the past, and I can see that in the model. This is how you should spend to drive, maybe get rid of that inventory or drive more acquisition in that particular target because it's a new product launch. So those are the three legs, right? So you have to have revenue, you have to have product, and you have to have revenue sales, and you have to have all the marketing. So those three things all work in concert together.
And kind of start to become that flywheel, right? As you push on the different pieces, the investment across should change and the output should change. I want to go back to what I had talked about before and kept in my brain in terms of the maturity, right? So we think about this, and what I believe we're talking about is very mature. But like thinking about where do you get started, right? So let's say I have no attribution. And I'd love your perspective. Do I start with first touch, right? Do I need to have first touch right before I do multi? I mean, like where, I think I'm curious on your perspective, because I think it depends, but I want to know what you see it depend on.
Yeah, for sure. So step one is data. I don't even, I really don't get into the attribution philosophy question until, again, paramount to everything is I got to have a single source of truth. Then the next step is, what is your reporting process today? Is it culturally, as an organization, are you using first touch? You're probably using last touch because that's the default typically, right? So cool. Now I have everything lined up, and I don't worry about attribution until I can see it in a dashboard and that it's scalable and repeatable. Done. Now I start figuring out how to make the data smarter. So, right, you get your data organized, you get a dashboard suite up so you can see it. Visibility is step two. Step three then becomes, how do I get smarter about how to use this data? Multi-touch attribution, optimization strategy, forecasting and media mix modeling is the planning and predictive strategy. So that's how it works, right? And so the process that we preach is a flywheel. It's, I want to get it all together. I want to line it up. I want to see it. I'm not worried about attribution yet. I want to line up marketing leads next to sales qualified leads. I got to see that. And so when I see it, then I can collaborate. That data model and that data dashboard, in this case, drives collaboration. And that's how you start making the data smarter.
No, that's great. And then, when you think about the question, I think people start to get, how long should this take, right? Like, what does this, what does this take? Do I need, I have this RevOps person who's doing marketing ops and sales ops, right? Like, what's the skill set that we need? How do I help support them? How long is this? This isn't a project, right? This is a mindset that you're continuously following, but like, how long does it take to be established in this type of framework?
So it's dependent upon the organization and the culture. So the other thing that I didn't really mention in that process of getting all your data together and seeing it and lining it all up, most organizations, we use things like media mix models and AI and multi-touch attributions in sentences. I would say 85% of the organizations aren't using it regularly or in a state that's really creating positive change. So the number one headwind you're going to battle, particularly when you start talking about things like media mix modeling, aka dark magic for some people. It's like,
why does everything have to have dark in front of it? We got dark social, dark magic. Like,
yeah, it's really dark magic. I don't trust any of it. So you have to build trust in the process, right? So we can spin up a media mix model, like I said, in 15 minutes, and you have an output tomorrow. But that doesn't mean people are going to trust it, right? It's just like anything. So a big part of RevOps is being that champion of how do I build trust in what the process is and what the data is telling me to move beyond what my gut says, either from a sales or marketing perspective, because we still use this thing called our innate gut or gut feeling to make decisions, and we choose to just ignore the data. And that's where RevOps has to play an influential role in not only helping create the repetitive processes, but also to be the data champion, because we're not in the business just to put out pretty creative or keywords. We're in the business of driving revenue, and marketing needs to, play their part in that process.
Yeah. And so when you think about, one of the things we talk a lot about from like a RevOps perspective is like, the decision-making council, like how do you really steer and bring that together? How have you seen kind of that framework set up? What's the right frequency? Who's in the room? Those people.
Yeah. And before I get to that question, I don't know if I answered all of your question before, which was the cadence in the process. So one of the things that, again, that RevOps can really champion and lead, because typically marketing and sales, the operations role needs to drive this process, is my point. And we oftentimes play that role, not because we want to, it's just because we're standing in the gap. So the first thing to do is just get everybody in the room and do this crazy thing, like list out all your data sources on a whiteboard. What do you use in sales? What do you use in marketing? Where do you spend your money? So you have to audit the inventory of all these things that are going to ultimately influence the revenue operations decisions. And so once you do that, right, then the frequency should be there's two frequencies. On a daily basis, marketing should be using data to optimize while they're in campaign, using strategies like multi-touch attribution. Monthly, a good cadence is to sit down and see, well, this is how much marketing spent, this is how much activity, or how much lead gen activity we actually created, and how many we actually closed from a sales perspective. And you get in this cadence of looking at the pipeline, right? The integrated pipeline, the connected pipeline, to drive your planning decisions. Today, we still do those things like, oh, it's springtime. I need to do we've always done this campaign every year on April 19th. So we're behind, guys. We got to get this campaign. Well, okay. Does sales even know about it? Is the product even, right? So that's where, again, having a connected data and having a real revenue operation strategy around what is the purpose and intent of every dollar that I spend and how is it affecting downstream sales. I got to get in that mindset. And of course, you got to have a platform like Channel Mix to support it.
One of the things I think about, with the changes in campaigns, right? Like, when do you know if a campaign's working or not, right? So like, what's your indicator there, especially when you do something new? How do you suggest people set, their hypothesis and like those indicators?
So so our process would say, let's say, I need to generate, back to my example, of 100 customers, and I need to spend $100,000 to do that based on past history, right? So the model will tell me how to spend that $100,000. And let's say it's 25,000 goes to paid search. Boom, campaign's activated, cross-channel, it's firing. Every day, I should be looking at a dashboard that's updating with multi-touch attribution to tell me how people are actually using these channels to path to conversion. You don't want to be making budget changing decisions every day, right? But you want to be making optimization decisions in terms of which creative is actually generating the most interaction or keyword. You want to be doing that on a daily basis. And so click-through rate, right? You're using media platforms to help you understand how to maximize your click-through rate at the lowest cost based on creative keyword, whatever. And then you're using multi-touch attribution out of your first-party website cookie data to understand how those channels are actually working together. And so while you're in campaign, those two strategies help you optimize, right? And so after then, let's say it's a 30-day campaign, that entire time, guess what's also learning is the media mix model. It's learning what's happening and the impact that this campaign in particular is having on, let's say, lead gen.
Yep.
So then it's going to learn to tell you, do more of this, do less of this. And that's where in-campaign strategies, right, with media platforms, optimizing the creative, optimizing the campaign using multi-touch, and then optimizing your spend. That's how all three of those things have to work together.
No, that's helpful. Just trying to think, check on time quick. We're doing good. When we go back to, I'm going to talk about RevOps a little bit too. So we've talked about, you typically are seeing a little bit more decentralization of this, but like, what would you like to see, right? Like, so as you think about, the future of RevOps, of marketing ops, like how do they continue to work better together versus, maybe not what we've talked about so far in terms of, counsel and alignment, but what are some other areas just for better alignment? And it could be marketing, sales, go to market, everything together. But like, what are we not doing well that we should consider being aware of?
I think, so it's a great question, and I'll give you some opinions because they're all free. And the first one is, number one, you have to decide what is so for marketing ops, right? That's often defined as somebody who's helping with the process and the activity and the workflow and those sorts of things. Totally get it. Totally understand it. I would say that typically I don't see that role a lot you'll see it in really large organizations, right? Where you're trying to literally herd the cats and make sure everybody's on the same page operationally. I would say, for the most part though, I would much rather prefer that whoever is in charge of these systems, right? So like ours is we're obviously an analytics platform. How is that analytics platform talking to our CRM platform, talking to our lead nurture? That is, because that's decentralized, it creates a lot of inefficiency. And I think that having somebody from a RevOps perspective looking through the lens of how do I connect these systems to drive revenue decisions, that's where I think there's huge opportunity for organizations as it relates to RevOps. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. And I think, as you think about kind of what changes in an organization and like having that holistic picture, that is one position where RevOps sits really well, and is well positioned for kind of seeing the cross-functional and especially around the systems and the integrations and knowing, hey, I made this change here. How's that going to impact the 12 other places that are ingested in this data? Curiosity wise, I'm curious when we think about, the right type of headcount for paid, right? Or for, I'm going to pick your brain on paid right now. At what point should companies bring in-house versus use agencies? Like, do you have any good rule of thumb or recommendations there?
Yes. So I think,
this is totally off topic, but I just got really curious. So sorry.
I think it's a fantastic question because I think we are in the midst of a huge shift in the marketing space.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. AI is completely disrupting how we do marketing. And it's disrupting it in
how we do a lot of things.
Yeah, there's three primary lanes, right? So there's content. Obviously, you can go to ChatGPT and say, "Hey, ChatGPT, write me this book," and it'll
write me anything.
Write me anything. That's content. There's creative, right? So, hey, I need an image, and I want you to incorporate this, this, and this, whether it's Firefly or any of the other creative AI engines that are out there. So it's less dependent. If I can do this self-service, I don't need an agency for creative. I don't need an agency for content. And the third leg of that stool is performance analytics, which is the lane we live in, right? So using AI that's machine learning based is where we're going as an industry. And so I think that it's less about, do I use an agency or not? It's more about, this is what's happening in the space.
Yep.
I don't need to pay high service expense anymore for an agency. I may need an agency to help me execute and do my media placement.
Yep.
But like creative content, and now with, our biggest growth is working directly with brands because they need to take control of their data. It doesn't need to be siloed out. I think the days of agencies shipping over PDFs and PowerPoints and saying, hey, we did really good, and we're using third-party media pixels to tell that value story, those days are dead.
Right.
And they've been dying for a long time. I think finally with cookie deprecation, it's beginning to accelerate it. So I think brands need to really take a step back and understand all of the opportunity that there is. I think agencies still play a role in media execution today.
Yep.
As it relates to particularly performance analytics, we're seeing a huge trend, and rightly so, for brands to take control of their data, because it's such a connected part of their strategy of what the RevOps team should be doing, which is, I need this data. I need to combine it with sales. I need to combine it with the other parts of the organization so I can tell the revenue story.
Yep.
And you can't do that if your data is disconnected with an agency.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Because you're just creating more of those silos. No, that's great perspective. And, it's the creative, the content pieces too. It's like, oh yeah, that really is there and totally makes sense. And it's also kind of terrifying, but.
It is. It's terrifying in a lot of ways, because I think it's really good. It's disrupting the industry already,
Yep.
but we are just getting started. I mean, if it was the adoption curve, we're still over to the far left.
Yeah.
In that curve, but it's coming, and it's coming fast.
When you think about people who maybe, are earlier in their career or looking at a shift in their career, right? What are the things that they can do to start being, more knowledgeable or, leveling themselves up in this type of understanding and this experience, if it's maybe something they're not getting, day to day in their role?
Yeah, I think that, think about those three lanes. If you're in the marketing space, think about those three lanes: content, creative, and analytics. And if you're passionate about one of those, really go deep. Right? Because I think that I'll give you an example here. So we don't have a content writer anymore. It's outsourced for $20 a month to this thing called ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Now, is it perfect? No. But does it do a lot of the ideation, a lot of the grunt heavy lifting? Absolutely. And it's all prompt based. Yep. So learning how to write prompts and learning how to ask the right questions using an AI tool, you become very, very valuable to an organization, because you're taking advantage of technology to create efficiency. And there's a lot of learning still to do with how to leverage AI in the right way. The technology is it's still a little bit dated, but it's it's accelerating super, super quickly. And so if you fast forward 2 years from now, well, what do we look like as an industry? We're going to look a whole lot different.
Now, how do you prepare for what that is going to look like, right? So how do you start to get ahead of the curve? And I think about, the people who are like, oh yeah, I've been, a content writer for 20 years, right? Or 5 years. Like, how do I prepare myself for that pivot so I'm ahead and valuable?
Yeah, I think the first thing is embrace the technology. Embrace it as a way to make me more efficient, not make me go away.
Yep.
And I think that's the mindset we should all have. In the analytics space, you still need to understand tools to tell a story. So I always tell people earlier in their career, if you want to go into analytics, learn how to use a tool like Tableau or Power BI. They're the industry leaders, and they're really storytelling tools, right? You have to assume that the data is there, but learn how to tell a story with data. It's just like creative content. Learn how to tell the story. But rather than seeing it as somebody who's, going to take over my desk with a laptop and a meme just sitting there, that's actually not real. Embrace it and really use it as a way to drive more speed and create more efficiency in your organization.
What's one thing, like, as you go in and you work with different companies or even internally, like, you just wish people knew, right? Like, that maybe is, sorry, that's like the most direct way to say it, right? But you just, like, okay, I'm on my soapbox. Like, I wish people just understood this.
Yeah, I think it's, we live and breathe analytics here at Channel Mix. So because of that. What's that?
I said I'd be concerned if you didn't.
Yeah. I mean, sure. I mean, we don't. Yeah, and we drink a lot of LaCroix. And so my point is that by doing something that you're so immersed in, you begin to make assumptions that people should just know what multi-touch attribution is and how it works. Well, they probably have heard of it, but they don't really know what it means or how to apply it in their day-to-day practice. And so my point is that I think that as we accelerate in our ability to use tools in the AI space, the risk is that we just keep making those assumptions, and we can't. We have to pull ourselves back out of that hole and say, this is the story and this is why, and then you go deeper. It's no different than how we actually approach analytics. It's like, I can't show up tomorrow and show you this really complex media mix model and tell you how to spend your money in the next 3 months when they have no context to how I even got there.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the challenge for all of us.
How do you know, I'm trying to think through and play devil's advocate, right? Like, how do you find the different narrator? You know, like, what have you seen from, like, you know, that getting that different perspective, or, you know, bringing that different party in to say, like, okay, I know maybe we're in this, you know, vicious cycle where we've been doing the same thing and hit that rut. You know, what advice do you have for, like, mixing it up?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it takes people outside of an organization. Do you
Mm-hmm.
remember I think it's an Office Max commercial, one of the commercials where everybody's sitting around and let's say you said something and then I said the same thing, but I did this, right? Well, I didn't do anything different. I just made the hand gesture. And so a lot of times it's, hey, rather than trying to push the string, as I often use that analogy, rather than trying to push a string, flip it and say, hey, I'm going to have Matt come in and give us a quick talk on whatever the strategy is. So
Yep.
we all understand what's coming. And then you've level set so that there's some common understanding of how this thing works, which then allows you to have dialogue a lot more efficiently. And
Yep.
because people are naturally resistant to change, they just are. And so I'm not one of those people, but most people are just very resistant to change. And until you articulate it, they kind of feel dumb. And, you know, think about somebody coming to talk to me about, you know, craft fairs. I don't know anything about craft fairs. Maybe I
Right.
should. Why is this important to me? Well, explain it to me.
Yeah, I think the thing that you said there, right, that we overlook is, like, get everybody on the same playing field and, like, just level setting. I think
Yeah.
just helps, right? And not only helps people from, you know, imposter syndrome or, like, feeling bought in, or, like, you know, that, but just again helps that clean slate piece that I think we sometimes just don't do a great job of. That's really good advice.
And it
Um,
really, yeah, and it goes back to the purpose of RevOps. The
yeah.
purpose of RevOps is to get everybody on the same page to understand what's driving revenue and why it's working and why it's not working.
Yep. Yeah, and bringing kind of, you know, I think a lot about my job specifically is, like, I'm kind of that mediator, and I'm that, you know, neutral party across these functions that's helping play devil's advocate, helping kind of say the
Yep.
things that we see, and help, you know, trying to not be more consultative versus, like, going so deep that you have that full ownership of domain knowledge, instead
Yep.
supporting it. Um, you know, I know we're coming up on time here. What's anything else you want to talk about that we didn't talk about? I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I appreciate you jumping into all my different tangents here.
Oh no, I love it. It's how I have my best conversations. Like fire away. No, I think we covered off on a lot. I think you know at the end of the day, I would start to kind of seal off on this last topic we were talking about. I would, whether it's marketing operations, sales ops, rev ops, all of it has to work together. And so I
Yeah.
would start with education before proof points. Does that make sense? Like really
Yep.
start with educating why you're doing this and the impact that it's having. We know that when you have a connected marketing and sales team, your sales and revenue are actually going to be 30 to 35% higher. It's just proven because people are aligned.
Yep.
And many times that alignment has to start with a higher education point rather
Yeah.
than a proof point.
Yeah, and it's you laugh, right? Because I'm like, yeah, no, sorry, I was gonna curse there, but, like, it's just it's just obvious, right? Like, oh yeah, when the trains are both going in the same direction, they get to the same destination. Like, sometimes one gets there sooner rather than later, but if they go in the different directions, like, they don't get to the same point. So, like, how you get that alignment and get that buy-in up front against that strategy, like,
Yep.
goes to the same place, right? And that's where, shared goals, I think, are so important. And like, whether, you can't be like, hey, marketing, you got to start closing deals, right? That's not marketing's role. But when you take the step back of like, what does marketing support in that process, and what does sales support, and what's that outcome? And then being able to ultimately measure it, right? You can't be like, hey, marketing, you need to influence, $100,000 of opportunities a month, and then be like, okay, cool, no idea what that actually means. You still have to be able to measure and track, and the data comes in. But getting that skin in the game and that like shared goal, I think just is something companies tend to not do. And then they're like, well, why aren't we aligned? Well, you have strategies that go in different directions.
Yep. And the connective tissue and driving those connected conversations is data.
Yep.
It truly is.
Yeah, you can't improve what you don't measure, right? And you can't measure what you don't track.
You can't manage what you can't see, right?
Yeah. I think that's great. Anything else you want to cover? I think you've hit all my pieces. Audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in too.
Yeah, fire away. If anybody has any questions, obviously, I'm out on LinkedIn, open for any questions. I spend most of my time educating, right? So we've been doing this a long time, and I know what works and what doesn't work, and we're here to help.
Perfect. Yeah, I dropped your LinkedIn into the chat. I feel like you're super open to connections and are posting great resources out there. So we'll really appreciate the time today, and thanks for joining us. I learned a lot and asked a lot of questions. So thanks for appeasing me.
No. I appreciate the invitation, and let's stay connected. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Happy Wednesday. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.